She stood outside the grand wedding hall, barefoot and trembling, tears rolling down her dirt-streaked cheeks. No one knew who she was, but everyone watched. Just when the whispers turned into laughter, a man in a tailored suit stepped forward, held her hand, and asked a question that made time stop. It was supposed to be just another spring afternoon. The air smelled of fresh flowers and expensive perfume as guests gathered for a lavish wedding at Belcrest Hall, the most luxurious venue in town. Cars pulled up one by one, each more extravagant than the last. Music played softly, cameras flashed, everyone looked their best. And then she appeared. A girl, barely 20, stood across the street, tattered dress, no shoes, her hair a tangled mess. Her eyes, red from crying, stared blankly at the double doors of the hall, as if something inside was tearing her apart. Some people glanced at her and turned away. Others whispered, smirked, even laughed. To them, she didn't belong in this picture-perfect setting. But she didn't move. She just stood there, crying. A little boy pointed at her from his mother's side. "Why is that girl sad, Mommy?" The woman pulled him close and walked faster, embarrassed by the scene. Two teenage girls took out their phones, giggling as they filmed her. "She probably got dumped," one of them sneered. She clutched her hands tightly, as if trying to keep herself from collapsing. Her lips moved, but no words came out, only the silent ache of someone betrayed. Inside the hall, laughter erupted. The groom had just arrived, confident and handsome. He greeted guests, shook hands, and smiled for the cameras. Everyone cheered. No one noticed the storm brewing just outside, until one man did. Across the sidewalk, leaning against a sleek black car, a man in a dark grey suit watched the girl closely. He was tall, well-groomed, and looked like he belonged to that world of wealth and power. But his eyes weren't filled with judgment like the others. They were searching. Slowly, he stepped off the curb. The music from inside the hall faded in his mind. All he could hear was the sound of her soft, broken sobs. He walked past the crowd, ignoring the puzzled stares. When he reached her, he bent slightly and looked into her face. She flinched, but he didn't let go. He gently took her hand. It was cold and trembling. "Why are you crying?" he asked, his voice calm and low. For a moment, she couldn't answer. Then, she looked up at him, and everything changed. As the man held her trembling hand, time seemed to freeze for the onlookers. It was as if no one could believe what they were seeing. A man like him, clean-cut, elegant, powerful, touching her, a poor girl crying in rags outside the most exclusive wedding in town. The whispers grew louder. "Who is she?" someone murmured. "She's probably some drama queen trying to ruin the wedding," another guest hissed. "I bet she's on drugs," a woman said, her pearl earrings swinging as she shook her head disapprovingly. No one stepped forward. No one offered her a jacket or a glass of water. Just stares, long, judgmental stares. One man even scoffed, "He's probably just being polite. Watch, he'll walk away in a minute." But he didn't. The man in the suit, whose name no one yet knew, remained by her side. He leaned closer, shielding her slightly from the crowd, and whispered something that made her eyes widen. She clutched her stomach as if in pain and suddenly dropped to her knees. Gasps echoed across the entrance. Some people laughed nervously. Others instinctively backed away, as if her poverty might rub off on them like dirt on white linen. The man knelt beside her, ignoring his expensive pants brushing the dusty pavement. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "It's okay," he said again, calmly but firmly. "You're safe now." She opened her mouth, tried to speak, but nothing came. Her voice was swallowed by emotion. Tears streamed down her cheeks in silence. The only sound was the sharp clicking of high heels as a well-dressed woman walked past them, shooting a disgusted glance in their direction. "Unbelievable," the woman muttered. "On a wedding day, no less." A small circle had now formed around them, not of support, but of curiosity. Guests who had come to celebrate love were now spectators to pain. The girl curled her fingers into the man's hand, not knowing who he was, but needing someone, anyone, to see her, to hear her story. The man looked up at the crowd, then back down at her. "What's your name?" he asked softly. She hesitated, then whispered, "Emily." The name trembled in the air, delicate and honest. "Emily," he repeated, as if trying to remember it forever. "You don't have to be alone anymore." But as more people watched, the murmurs continued to twist and poison the atmosphere around them. No one knew yet what had brought her there, but everyone had a theory, and none of them were kind. The bride's uncle leaned toward another guest and sneered, "This better not mess up the ceremony. These types love attention." Inside the hall, music still played, unaware of the storm about to strike, and the man, still holding Emily's hand, stood up slowly and looked toward the wedding doors. Because whatever brought Emily here was inside that building, and he intended to find out what. He stood tall now, his hand still gently wrapped around Emily's fragile fingers. The fabric of his suit, custom-tailored and undoubtedly expensive, rippled slightly in the breeze, but his gaze remained fixed, steady, unblinking, on the grand entrance of the wedding hall. Emily looked up at him, confused and afraid. She didn't know who he was. His sudden kindness felt foreign, almost suspicious. No one had ever come to her defense like that, especially not a man like him. But he wasn't like the others. That much was already clear. His name was Nathan, though no one had spoken it aloud yet. To most people in town, he was the mysterious executive from the city, rarely seen, never involved in local gossip, but always present at the most elite events. He owned several properties, a few tech patents, and a reputation as a man who didn't waste time with small talk. Yet here he was, wasting no time at all, standing beside a girl no one would touch. A valet hesitated near the entrance, unsure whether to interrupt. "Sir, do you need—" Nathan lifted one hand slightly, a silent command. The valet stepped back. Emily's eyes darted nervously toward the hall. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered. "They'll see me. They'll throw me out." Nathan lowered his gaze to hers. "Who's inside?" She bit her lip, her voice cracking. Someone who promised he'd marry me." Nathan's jaw tightened, ever so slightly. "Who?" he asked. Emily shook her head, ashamed. "He said he loved me. We were together for almost a year. I didn't know he was engaged to someone else this whole time." The pain in her voice was raw, unfiltered. Nathan didn't ask for a name. Not yet. Instead, he guided her gently to a nearby bench just outside the stone steps of the hall. His actions were calm, deliberate, as if he had a plan, but was waiting for the right moment to strike. People inside had started to notice the commotion. A bridesmaid peeked through a curtain. One of the waiters leaned out, curious. Nathan's phone buzzed. He ignored it. "Why did you come here, Emily?" he asked, his voice low but firm. She trembled. I thought maybe if I saw him one last time, maybe he'd explain. Maybe he'd see me and remember what he said, what he promised." Nathan narrowed his eyes, almost as if something clicked in the back of his mind. Then he sat back, and he stared at her face. Really stared, like he was studying something familiar, but forgotten. Her features, her eyes, that name, Emily. Something in his memory stirred. And just like that, the man who had everything, power, money, status, suddenly looked like he had lost something important. But before he could speak again, the heavy doors of the hall opened, and a familiar face walked out, laughing and sipping champagne. Emily gasped. Her entire body froze. Nathan followed her gaze, and that's when he saw him. The groom, the man who stepped out of the wedding hall, looked every bit the picture of charm and success. His tuxedo was perfectly tailored, his hair slicked back with just the right amount of polish. He smiled wide, waved to guests, and raised his champagne glass like a man who had the world at his feet. But Emily couldn't breathe. Her nails dug into her own palms, her whole body shaking as her eyes locked onto the groom. Nathan glanced sideways at her. "Is that him?" She nodded slowly, tears welling up again. "His name is Brian." Nathan's jaw tightened. He turned his attention back to the groom, watching him closely. Watching the way Brian flirted with the bridesmaids, the way he posed for photos like a celebrity, the way he carried himself as if his lies weren't standing a few feet away. Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "He told me I was the only one. He said he didn't believe in big weddings, that he wasn't ready to tell his family about me yet. He even made me promise to stay quiet while he figured things out." Nathan didn't speak right away. Instead, he took a deep breath and stood. "Wait, where are you going?" Emily asked, panic in her voice. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Just stay here." Before she could protest, Nathan walked up the stone steps, his footsteps sharp and deliberate, like the ticking of a clock counting down to something explosive. Guests turned their heads as he entered the hall, some whispering in confusion. A few recognized him. Nathan wasn't someone you invited. He was someone who showed up when it mattered. Inside, the bride stood near the altar, radiant in her lace gown, surrounded by photographers and family. Brian had returned to her side, grinning as if he owned the moment. Nathan didn't blink. He walked straight up to Brian and tapped his shoulder. Brian turned, clearly annoyed. "Hey man, this is kind of a private..." Nathan cut him off with a single calm sentence. "Did you think you could leave her crying out there forever?" Brian froze. The words landed like a slap. The room went silent. The bride frowned. "What is he talking about, Brian?" Brian laughed nervously. I don't know. I think there's some mistake." But Nathan didn't give him room to lie. "She's sitting outside in a torn dress, shaking. She still has the necklace you gave her. She still believes the things you told her." The bride's face turned pale. Emily, still outside, covered her mouth as she tried to hear what was being said. She didn't dare move, but her heart raced with every passing second. Back inside, Brian tried to step around Nathan. "This isn't the place, man." "Let's talk later, okay?" Nathan stepped in front of him again, calm and unshaken. "You told her you loved her. You used her. And now you're marrying someone else like none of it happened." A loud gasp came from one of the guests. The bride looked like the ground had vanished beneath her. "I'm going to ask you one question," Nathan said, stepping even closer. "Why?" Brian's eyes darted between Nathan and the guests, now circling in. "You don't know what you're talking about." She meant nothing. The room went still, and from outside the hall, Emily heard it all. Emily could hardly sit still. Her body was frozen, but her soul felt like it was burning. Every word that echoed from the wedding hall stabbed deeper into her chest. She heard Brian's voice, cold and detached. She meant nothing. Nothing. After everything they'd shared, the late-night conversations, the promises whispered under streetlights, the nights he stayed with her when she had nowhere to go. She was now just nothing to him. She curled forward, her arms wrapped around her knees, trying not to sob aloud. But it was too late. A few guests had come outside, watching her now with more than curiosity. Some whispered. One woman, wearing a satin blue dress, stepped closer, sympathy flickering in her eyes. "Sweetheart, did he really do this to you?" she asked softly. Emily nodded slowly, her voice breaking. "We met at the diner where I work. He used to come in every Wednesday. He liked how I made his coffee, double cream, no sugar. He always smiled at me. Told me I had a warm heart. She sniffled, wiping her face. I didn't know he was rich at first. He never acted like it. He'd sit at the counter with me during my break. Sometimes he'd bring flowers. We'd walk in the park. He said he grew up poor, like me. I trusted him. Her voice cracked again, this time with a deeper pain. I told him things I've never told anyone. About how I lost my mom when I was a kid. About my dad leaving. How I slept on couches for years. I thought he understood. The woman listening shook her head in disbelief. He led you on the whole time? Emily looked down. 3 months ago, he said he was getting overwhelmed. He needed time. I believed him. I backed off. I waited. She let out a bitter laugh. And today, I saw his photo on a wedding invitation in the trash behind the diner. My friend said the bride's family booked Bellcrest. I didn't believe it. I thought maybe it was a mistake. Her hands trembled. I came here just to see if it was true. And when I saw him, smiling like nothing happened, it broke something in me. The woman reached out and gently squeezed Emily's hand. For a moment, there was silence. Then Nathan appeared at the doorway. His face was calm, but there was fire in his eyes. Without saying a word, he stepped aside, and behind him, the bride walked out, her face pale, her hands shaking. She looked directly at Emily, and in that instant, something passed between them. Not hate, not judgment, but a question, and maybe something else entirely. The bride stopped just a few steps from Emily, her veil gently fluttering in the breeze. Her eyes, still glossy from the shock inside, scanned the girl before her, the torn dress, the swollen eyes, the fragile way she stood like a wounded animal bracing for another blow. Emily couldn't look at her. Shame pulled her gaze to the ground, but the bride spoke first. "What's your name?" Her voice wasn't cruel. It wasn't cold. It trembled, not with anger, but with something else. Doubt, pain, maybe even recognition. Emily whispered, "Emily, Emily Grace." The bride blinked. Her hand flew to her mouth. Nathan stepped between them gently. "You okay?" he asked the bride, who now looked like she'd seen a ghost. She nodded slowly, never taking her eyes off Emily. I've heard that name before." Emily frowned, confused. "I don't think we've met." The bride shook her head, almost in a daze. No, not you. I mean the name. It was in a letter, years ago." Nathan narrowed his eyes. "What kind of letter?" The bride hesitated, then turned to Nathan. "From my father, before he died." Now it was Emily's turn to look up. "My father's name was Charles Whitley," the bride said. "He left me a letter when I was 13. In it, he talked about a woman he loved before he married my mother. He said she was poor but kind, that they were young. He said she got pregnant, but he never found her again." Emily's heart stopped. "My mother found the letter and tore it up. She said it was all lies, that he had too much to drink the night he wrote it. But I kept the name he mentioned." She looked directly at Emily now. "Grace. He said if I ever met a girl named Emily Grace, I should protect her." Emily's knees nearly buckled. Nathan stepped closer, steadying her. "Are you saying—" The bride nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "She might be. My sister." Silence fell like a blanket over the moment. No one moved, not even the wind. Emily felt her whole life shifting under her feet. Could it be true? Could the girl standing in front of her, wearing the gown she had dreamed of, about to marry the man who broke her heart, be her half-sister? Nathan looked from one woman to the other. His mind raced. Then, almost instinctively, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small leather notebook. It was old, worn at the corners. He flipped through its pages, stopping at a photo tucked inside. "Emily," he said gently, handing it to her. "Is this your mother?" Emily's hands trembled as she took it. She gasped. "Yes, that's her, when she was young." Nathan exhaled slowly. "That photo was given to me by a friend of your mother's, years ago." The bride covered her mouth again, shaking. "We're connected," she whispered. But what that connection meant, no one was prepared for. Emily stood frozen, the photo still clutched in her shaking hands. Her heart pounded like a drum inside her chest. The bride, her possible half-sister, looked just as stunned, her veil slightly askew, her expression caught between disbelief and wonder. Nathan watched them both closely. This wasn't just a ruined wedding anymore. This was something deeper, something that fate had stitched long before anyone knew it was coming undone. "I never knew my father," Emily whispered. "My mom always said he left before I was born. She never talked about him again." The bride's eyes welled with tears. "He stayed with my mother, but he was never the same. He always seemed haunted. I thought it was guilt. Now I know why." They stood in silence for a moment, both women shaken by the sudden shift in reality. Strangers seconds ago, now possibly blood. Nathan took a slow breath. "This wasn't random. You being here, the wedding, Brian, all of this led to something bigger than betrayal." Emily turned to him. "But how do we know it's true?" The bride, her name was Caroline, stepped forward. "I still have part of that letter. I kept it hidden. It has your mother's name. And he wrote something that never made sense to me before." She reached into the folds of her dress and carefully pulled out a small, yellowed piece of paper, folded neatly into a square. With trembling hands, she passed it to Emily. Emily opened it slowly. "And if you ever find her, if Emily Grace ever crosses your path, protect her like the sister she is. She is my blood, my regret, my gift to the world." Emily gasped. It felt like the world collapsed and reformed all in a single heartbeat. Tears streamed down her cheeks. So he did love her. He just never found her again. Nathan's expression softened. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he gently placed his hand on Emily's shoulder. "You weren't abandoned, Emily. You were lost. And now, maybe you've been found." Caroline reached for Emily's hand, the same hand that just hours earlier had been clinging to the edge of despair. Emily let her take it. Their hands fit together awkwardly, uncertainly, but they didn't let go. Then, from the doorway, a voice broke the fragile silence. "Well, isn't that sweet?" It was Brian, standing there, smirking. "I see you've made friends," he said with a sneer. "Or should I say, family?" Nathan's body stiffened. Caroline turned, her eyes narrowing. "You lied to both of us." Brian shrugged. "Come on. You think this charity case means anything now? You're still my bride, Caroline. We've got a hall full of people waiting." Caroline stared at him in stunned disbelief. Then Emily stepped forward, no longer crying. "I'm not nothing," she said firmly. Brian laughed. "No? You were good enough to keep on the side, but—" Nathan cut him off with a look so sharp it could have drawn blood. "Say another word," he said coldly, "and you'll regret it." Brian scoffed, but something in Nathan's eyes made him back off slightly. Emily didn't move, because now she had something Brian could never take away again: family, truth, and the strength to stand up. Caroline turned to face Brian fully now, her wedding gown trailing behind her like a symbol of the life she thought she was stepping into. Elegant, carefully planned, spotless. But that illusion had shattered, and what lay beneath was something far uglier. "You lied to me," she said, her voice trembling with rising fury. "You lied about where you were, who you were seeing, everything. Brian raised an eyebrow. I was protecting you. Do you know what it would have looked like if anyone found out I was involved with her? He nodded toward Emily with cruel disdain. Caroline's face went pale. Her? You mean your fiancé's half-sister? A murmur spread through the crowd now gathering at the doorway. Guests had abandoned their champagne and hors d'oeuvres to witness the real drama unfolding outside. Phones were out, filming discreetly. Some jaws hung open, others turned away in discomfort. Brian looked around, realizing the situation was spiraling fast. I didn't know she was your sister, he snapped. She was just some girl I met at a diner. She chased me. I was just having fun. Nathan stepped forward slowly, his expression calm but his eyes sharp. You used her, lied to her, and discarded her like trash. And now you're standing here justifying it. Brian chuckled bitterly. Who the hell are you anyway? Her lawyer? No, Nathan said flatly. I'm someone who gives a damn when others don't. Caroline stepped between them before things escalated further. She turned to Brian, her voice lower now but stronger. When did it start? Before we got engaged? Brian hesitated. That pause was all she needed. Tears sprang to her eyes, not out of sadness anymore, but from rage and disgust. You proposed to me while you were sleeping with my sister, she whispered. You brought me here today, dressed me in white, swore to love me forever, and all the while, you knew. I didn't think she'd show up, he shouted, his arrogance crumbling into panic. I thought she knew her place. That was it, the line no one could forgive. The crowd gasped. Even the most skeptical faces turned hostile. Some guests started walking away in disgust. Nathan stepped forward again, but Caroline raised a hand to stop him. No, she said firmly, her voice shaking with controlled fury. He's not worth it. Then she turned to Emily. I'm so sorry, Caroline said, voice cracking, for everything, for not knowing, for not protecting you sooner. Emily's eyes brimmed with tears again. But this time, they weren't from shame. They were from being seen. Finally. Brian rolled his eyes and muttered, This is ridiculous. I'm not going to stand here and be... He didn't get to finish. The owner of Belcrest Hall stepped out from behind the door, holding a clipboard. Mr. Carver, he said sharply, we'll be cancelling your event. Please remove yourself from the premises. Brian froze. What? You can't do that. We paid... Not anymore, you haven't, the man said. And we don't host liars who humiliate women in front of our staff. Gasps. More phones recorded. And just like that, the groom was left standing alone, with nothing but a collapsing future and a ruined reputation. Emily and Caroline stood side by side, and for the first time in years, maybe ever, neither of them felt alone. Brian stood still, jaw clenched, fists tightening at his sides. The glittering fairy tale he'd built so carefully was crumbling around him, brick by dishonest brick. The guests who once clinked glasses in his honor now whispered and pointed, watching the real show unfold with hungry eyes. Get out, Caroline said, her voice calm but laced with steel. Brian looked between her and Emily, then to Nathan, whose stance remained unmoved, like a wall he couldn't get through. You're both insane, he muttered. This was supposed to be my day. Nathan stepped forward, his voice as smooth as ice but twice as cutting. Your day ended the second you decided that Emily was disposable, that women were just trophies on a shelf, one to use, one to marry, all to forget. You don't know me, Brian snapped. Nathan's jaw tightened. No, but I know enough. Brian started to say something else, but Caroline cut him off. You don't get to explain. You lied. You slept beside me at night while she cried herself to sleep. You kissed me with her name still fresh on your lips. More murmurs. Even the staff was watching now. Brian turned to the guests as if appealing to them. "You're all judging me. What, like you're saints? Like you've never made a mistake?" "This isn't a mistake," Caroline said, louder now so everyone could hear. "It's a pattern. You lie, you manipulate, and you pretend no one gets hurt. But we do. I did. She did." Emily didn't flinch. Her voice was soft, but it carried like a storm brewing beneath still waters. "I loved you," she said. "And I was ashamed of that. But I'm not anymore. Because I know now. The shame was never mine to carry." Brian's smirk faltered. He looked at Emily like he didn't recognize her anymore. Like the girl who had once waited at the diner window for his car to appear had vanished, replaced by someone stronger, unbreakable. Nathan moved between them again. "It's over. You need to go." Brian looked around, realizing he had no allies left. Not a single voice defended him. Even the band had stopped playing. The only sound now was the wind rustling through the trees and the quiet clicks of phones capturing the downfall of a man who once thought he was untouchable. With one last venomous glare, Brian turned and walked down the steps, alone, a broken prince without a kingdom. As he disappeared into the street, a sense of stillness fell over the crowd. Some guests slowly began to drift away, whispering about the scandal they had just witnessed, one they'd surely be talking about for years. But Caroline and Emily stood side by side, silent. They didn't need words right now. They had survived something together, something that didn't need a name. And Nathan, he just stood close, watching the two women finally reclaim their dignity. For the first time since the day began, Emily breathed, deeply, freely, as if the weight had lifted. But there was still one moment yet to come, one that would change everything again. The silence outside the grand wedding hall held for just a beat too long, heavy, thick with everything unsaid. Then, like a crack of thunder, it shattered. Applause. It started with a single clap, then another, and another. Within seconds, dozens of guests, once silent, once unsure, were clapping. Not for the cake, not for the ceremony, but for the truth. For the girl who stood alone and then refused to stay that way. For the woman who tore off the mask of a perfect bride and chose her dignity instead. For a sisterhood found in the most unexpected way. Emily froze. She had braced herself for shame, for pity, even for anger. But not for this. A woman in a burgundy dress stepped forward and hugged her tightly, whispering, "You're so brave, sweetheart." Another man, an older gentleman with tears in his eyes, tipped his hat. "I've got daughters. What you did, that was strength." Emily looked around, overwhelmed. This time her tears weren't from pain. Caroline took her hand again, and when their fingers laced together, the clapping only grew louder. Nathan stood beside them, not clapping, just watching, his chest rising and falling with a quiet kind of pride. He had known this moment could turn cruel, but instead it turned redemptive. A few guests began stepping forward, surrounding Emily and Caroline in a circle of protection. Some apologized. Some simply stood beside them in solidarity. But all of them, every last one, had turned their backs on Brian's legacy and chosen something better. Emily looked to Nathan. Her voice shook. "I don't understand. Why would you help me like this?" Nathan hesitated. Then softly he said, "Because once, a long time ago, I didn't help someone when I should have, and I never got the chance to fix it. Until now." Emily stared at him, trying to read the layers behind his calm face. "Who was she?" He swallowed. "Your mother." Gasps rippled through the small crowd. Caroline blinked in disbelief. Emily's breath caught in her throat. "I was too young, too scared. I loved her, but I let her go," Nathan said, his voice tight with emotion. When I heard her daughter's name all those years later, I started searching. I never stopped. The world tilted beneath Emily's feet again. "You're saying..." He nodded slowly. "I'm not your father, Emily. But I loved your mother more than anyone ever knew. And I swore that if I ever found you, I'd protect you the way I couldn't protect her." Emily's hand flew to her mouth. Caroline stepped closer. "You knew our father." Nathan nodded again, and I knew the pain he caused. The crowd, now fully invested, stood in stunned silence. This wasn't just a confrontation anymore. It was a legacy being rewritten. The sun had dipped lower in the sky now, casting a golden hue across the stone steps where everything had unraveled and been rebuilt. Emily stood in the center, surrounded by strangers who had become silent witnesses to her transformation. Her eyes flicked between Caroline, the sister she never knew she had, and Nathan, the man who had stepped in when no one else did. She still didn't fully understand why, but maybe she didn't need to. Sometimes people arrived exactly when they were meant to. Caroline squeezed her hand. "You have family now, Emily. Real family." But Emily's gaze slowly returned to Nathan, who stood a few feet away, watching her with something deeper than kindness, something almost reverent. He had never looked at her like she was broken, never once. "Do you regret it?" she asked him suddenly. Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Regret what?" "Not being there for her, for my mother." His jaw clenched softly. "Every day?" Emily nodded. "I think she would have liked you," she said. Nathan smiled faintly, and for the first time, she saw the sorrow behind his quiet strength. Then something shifted in his expression, a glimmer of something new, unspoken. He stepped closer. "Emily," he said gently, "I don't want this moment to be just a rescue. I don't want to be just another man who shows up and disappears." She blinked, stunned. "What are you saying?" He paused, then reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a small box. It wasn't velvet or fancy, just plain and honest. Gasps echoed again from the remaining crowd. Nathan dropped to one knee. "I don't know if this is too fast. I don't know if this is even what you want. But what I do know is, I've never seen someone so brave, so good, so honest in the face of cruelty. And I would be honored to stand beside you, however you'll have me." Emily's eyes widened, her breath catching. "You barely know me," she whispered. "I know enough," he said. "I know your heart. And I know I don't want to walk away wondering again what could have been." She glanced at Caroline, whose hand covered her mouth, eyes glistening. Then she looked back at Nathan, the man who saw her when she was invisible. Tears fell slow and quiet. And then she smiled, a real one. She reached out her hand. Yes. The crowd erupted in applause, but it wasn't the loud clapping of gossip or spectacle. It was soft, emotional, full of respect and awe. From the ashes of betrayal, something beautiful had risen. A vow, not built on lies, but on truth and choice. The air felt different now, softer, lighter. Where there had once been mocking stares and whispered ridicule, there was now warmth. Applause still echoed softly as the last guests lingered, not wanting to leave just yet, not wanting to miss the final beat of a story that had gripped their hearts. Emily stood on the steps of the same wedding hall where she had once cried alone in shame. Now she stood beside her sister, and the man who had just asked to share her future. No gown, no flowers, no music playing for her, and yet she had never looked more radiant. Nathan took her hand again, not to rescue her, not to guide her, but to walk beside her. Caroline, holding the discarded veil in her hand, turned to Emily with a soft laugh. It's yours if you want it. Emily shook her head. No, not today. She looked up at the sky, the sunlight warming her face, and breathed in deeply. Today isn't about weddings. It's about becoming someone I thought I lost. The onlookers, now few in number, offered quiet nods of understanding. One woman, older and dressed in navy, walked over and gently pressed a pressed white rose into Emily's palm. "Not all stories that start in pain have to end that way," she whispered. Emily smiled, and for the first time in years, she believed it. Brian was gone. So was the weight of abandonment, the lies, the shame she had carried like a second skin. In its place stood a new story, one she had written with her own tears, choices, and courage. A story of strength, of unexpected family, of love that didn't come in the way she imagined, but in the way she needed most. As they walked away from the hall, hand in hand, Caroline looped her arm around Emily's. "We'll take it slow," Nathan said softly. Emily nodded. We already survived the hard part. And as the golden light bathed their path, it felt like the world was offering them a new beginning, one built not on perfection, but on truth, scars, and something much stronger than fantasy: real love. Some stories don't start with flowers and music. Some begin with heartbreak, betrayal, and tears on the sidewalk. But those are the stories that stay with us, because they remind us of something powerful, that no matter how low life brings us, there is always a chance to rise again. Emily came to the wedding thinking she had lost everything. Instead, she found a sister, uncovered the truth about her past, and met a man who saw her worth when no one else did. She didn't get revenge. She got something far better. She got her life back. Now we want to hear from you. Have you ever been through something that almost broke you, but ended up revealing your true strength? Do you believe people can find real love after being hurt so deeply? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else watching. And if this story touched your heart, please consider leaving us super thanks. Your financial support helps us reach more people with stories that truly matter. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story like this one. And finally, click the video on your screen now to watch another true love story that will restore your faith in second chances.